Hey, we're live in yet another Ask Us Anything. In this session, we have the man behind the scenes, the man behind the curtain promised that he's going to appear. So this doesn't happen often in this channel, at least. So Darin is here with us in person. I mean, he's always in person, but we're gonna see his face. There he is, right? So let's, you start asking your questions. It's all about your questions. There is no script, there is no topic, there is nothing beyond answering your questions. So start posting them. And let's see what we have. We have one from Gaurav, I think. I'm never sure how to pronounce your names, guys, and girls, so sorry for that. What's the best way to handle CI or CI tool to use on something that involves too many file changes and comparing them to any changes to perform upgrades, sort of legacy, which tool to automate? As I might have misunderstood the question, but I don't think that that's specifically a question of CI tools, right? Or maybe I have a distorted view of CI tools. Darin might say something differently, but I see them as the last mile, right? You figure out how to do something, whatever that something is. It doesn't matter whether it involves too many file changes or comparing them with this or that or building or testing or whatever. You figure out how to do those things in a terminal on your laptop. And then you translate them to CI tools, right? So from that perspective, I think that the solution to such problem or any other is really outside of the domain of those tools. Sometimes they help, so I'm not saying they don't, but at least I don't like the idea of starting from a CI tool. There's Darin.
I want to add in something here. The line that says that involves too many file changes. Other than making a big jump, when I hear too many file changes, to me that sounds like PHP. Or something to where you're laying a lot of files down. You know, I'm biased. I come from a Java background, but usually a Java, it's packaged as a war. If you're doing containers, it's an image, right? There's a single binary-ish that gets deployed. If I hear too many files, that sounds back in the 90s type deal.
It depends whether it's too many files or too many changes to files. But if it's too many changes to files, that sounds like, hey, we are working for months on this feature and then we merge it somewhere and then a tool freaks out, kind of like, oh, you made 5,000 file changes in a few months and now you want to do something with it. If that's the case, and I don't know, then I think you have a different problem. You have a problem of how often you merge something to the main line.
The other way to look at that too is if you've got that type of scenario happening, you're trying to fix that, package it as a VM or AMI or wherever you're running and just replace the machine. I mean, yes, that means you need a blue-green type deployment, but that's the way I would do it. Because as soon as you have too many files and you have to do a rollback, it's going to be a bad day.
Exactly.
Plain and simple. It's going to be a bad day. You ready to move on?
Yeah. Let's move on. Okay. What else do we have?
Hopefully, the topic that everybody's asking about.
Oh, platform engineering. That's the thing. Yes. So what does it take to become a successful platform engineer? I think that I see two approaches people take to platform engineering. The first one is kind of, hey, you're a team or a person, worst scenario, and you create a platform that everybody will use, right? I don't think that that's a good one, right? Because that would mean that you need to know everything about everything, which is, let's face it, impossible, right? The second approach, the one I prefer, is platform engineer or engineers in plural, a team, is more like a owner of a product where everybody else contributes, right? Creating a framework rather than the solution and figuring out how all those integrations or contributions will work together somehow. So you have a person that is very proficient with Kubernetes, and he creates some kind of service that will enable people to be more efficient with Kubernetes. Great, right? Nothing to do so far with platform engineering. And then at one moment you say, okay, so now how can I take the work of that person or that team and plug it into our internal developer platform, right? How can I make that service work together with other services that we offer to everybody in our company, right? That is usually happening in bigger companies, and I think that works better because you cannot be an expert in everything, and platform at the end of the day touches almost everything, right? So I see it more like, what would be equivalent to a maintainer of an open source project, right? In open source, being a maintainer or a group of maintainers does not mean that you are doing everything, that you are in full control and you do all the commits and stuff like that. No, you're more organizing. You're doing the work as well, committing, pushing changes, new features, but you are also in charge of making sure that everybody else who is contributing to that project can do that successfully and follow certain guidelines and so on and so forth. I see internal developer platforms work like that better. So what does it take to become a successful platform engineer? Option A, learn everything about everything and figure out how you can offer everything about everything to everybody else in a way that they can use it, or be the one who coordinates and integrates other people's services and work. Stone, I've been using Terraform and noticing some limitations recently. Do you think CDK and SAM are good alternatives, or are they best used in parallel? So I'm not familiar with SAM. I don't think I am. I don't know what that is. And CDK, I'm biased here, right? I think that we are moving into control planes. I think that we are moving into running those processes in a cluster or in a server, exposing them through APIs and stuff like that. And I see CDK as being very similar to Terraform, right? Conceptually, not very different. So I wouldn't say that that's big of a change, to be honest. But again, I'm biased. I'm a person who works with cross-plane, so you might not want to listen to me. Argo Stack or Flux Stack, who is the winner? Again, very similar. So Flux Stack, I'm assuming that by that you mean Flux and Flagger. If you compare stacks like Flux and Flagger against 4 Argo projects, meaning Argo Workflows, Argo CD, Argo Events, and Argo Rollouts, then Argo is a clear winner because actually the stack does double. The scope of the stack is doubled, right? From that perspective, as a stack, it wins, and in isolation, right? Now, majority of people, when they talk about Argo and Flux, they refer mostly to Argo CD and Flux. In that case, it's a close call, right? There are a few things that one does better than the other, but they are very, very similar, right? There are things I like with Flux more. Like I really like Flux CLI. I think it's absolutely awesome. I like more Argo CD interface, user interface, web UI. There is Weaveworks, GitOps that you can use in a similar way, but I think it's not even close to Argo CD. But besides some differences, I think that you cannot go wrong with either of the two. If you're talking about Argo CD and Flux. If you talk about stacks, then Argo Stack is bigger. It covers more. Now, whether you need it, basically Argo Stack has Argo Workflows plus Argo Events that Flagger don't have, but they might be a bit challenging to use. From Yanni, we are using Helm charts for our applications. Great. Does it make sense to use Argo? Absolutely. Argo does Helm template, which is actually breaking Helm concept. Would it be better to use Flux in this case? I'm not sure whether. So, Helm does two things essentially. One is templating, right? It converts templates, Go templates essentially, into pure Kubernetes YAML before sending it to the API. And then it offers some kind of management of your charts, Helm LS, Helm get, and things like that. The latter really, I don't see value in it. So especially if you use something like Argo CD or Flux. So personally, I don't really care much whether Helm chart is deployed as a Helm chart or it's converted with Helm template command equivalent into Kubernetes manifest. I don't see a big difference because once you adopt those GitOps tools, you use those tools to manage your resources in Kubernetes cluster, and Helm effectively becomes limited only to convert template into YAML files. So it does make sense to use Argo, a lot of sense. And this is me without judging whether you should use Helm in the first place or not. Hello, John. Hello, in your opinion, what cutting-edge technology could change the industry in the next couple of years? Artificial intelligence. That's easy. That one is easy, right? What is happening now with OpenAI is just amazing, right? And it's just the beginning. I was a bit skeptical when it is going to happen and things like that, but with OpenAI, it's very clear. This is happening right now.
I want to dig into that a little bit more. Which part of OpenAI do you think is going to be we
don't
see
know
the
yet.
chat. Well, okay, so I have a theory.
Okay.
I have one working theory. You have the A lady around. No, wait, which do you use? I'm not saying the Amazon device is what I'm saying.
Google something, whatever it's called. Google,
right.
Yeah.
So however you say, hey, fill in the blank, go take care of this for me. So I could see a point, going back to the platform engineering part, this would be one of those plugin, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, go bootstrap a Java-based project for me and go ahead and set up my production and staging environments. Right? I say that. And then that's captured, translated into text via Whisper, which is from OpenAI, that then runs through the model that breaks that down. So we write a little bit of code to break that up and figure out what it is, hand that off potentially. And then out the backside, we get whatever it is.
But those are, kind of current implementations or usefulness to it, right? I'm kind of more wondering where
the blocks are there today. It's not
exactly.
It's not. That part's not cutting edge. What I'm saying though is now that's just normal, right? Now
exactly.
Fast forward ahead, you just say that, and instead of setting up Jira tickets to do all the things, part of that question would have gone ahead because provenance, all the other normal things that are starting to become a big deal, all of that stuff is magically all created for us. So what would take a team of fill in the blank, however many number of days, now is minutes.
And that's kind of one part of the story. Now imagine the other coin of that story that goes into operational part, right? And to me, that is a more interesting thing. Imagine when we start plugging something like that into our clusters and say, you do it. But not you do it as before. I was saying, you do it by me. I'm going to tell you, go to Prometheus and fetch this information to find out. And if the threshold that is X is reached, then you do. Then something should happen, right? No, kind of like, hey, Go do stuff for me. Not only help me write code and things like that, but literally hey, manage the system and call me over Alexa or Siri or Google or whatever when you realize that you cannot handle it, or when you need information from me. I mean, that's going to change things, at least from the perspective of software engineering, much more than helping write code, which is extremely helpful.
I think one of the other things too is with eBPF becoming bigger and bigger, not just in the Kubernetes space, but just in general. Now we take the data coming out of eBPF, and that's being used to help model out new things. That doesn't exist yet today that I see. But being able to take the data you pull out of eBPF, that's your environment, to where you're able to train models easily, and then slide in from whether it's OpenAI or anybody else, the other models. I'm not saying that we're going to be eliminating operations jobs, but we're going to be greatly reducing them.
Yeah, I mean, we will be trainers of those models, right? Because I imagine that industry is going to come up with some industry-wide models and stuff like that. But that will not work fully. Just as today you cannot say, hey, everybody goes to Heroku, right? When we start training the models and say, hey, okay, so this is what I do. This is what I do in this situation. And then something else happens and you come back and say, and this is what I would normally do when this happens. And you do that over a sufficient amount of time. And then at one moment he says, okay, but now there is this new thing that you didn't tell me what to do, but I figured out from your previous responses this is what should be done, right? When we started, I'm not seeing that yet, but I feel that we are getting to the point that companies start creating their own models. And that is going to be internal model, in models for internal usage. That is going to be a huge change. So it's you as a human,
that's going to be
you will be more
engineering.
instructor. Exactly.
Right. That's going to be the platform engineering, not what we're seeing today, not what we've been building for the past 20 years. Yes, platform engineering has been around that long.
Exactly.
But now that we can take these models in and we can build our own, we've been able to build our own models for years, doing predictive analytics. I mean, it's nothing new. It's just the scale that we're able to do it now.
Exactly.
And we've got the compute to do it, right? Now that we're no longer mining cryptocurrencies, we have all these GPUs laying around. If we can actually write to the M1, now M2 metal to be able to process things, right? It's the things that we have been doing for years is going to be changing.
It always does. Every couple of years or 5 years, we get a new change. This is going to replace me. It's not going to replace you if you adapt. That's the question. Will you adapt? Adapt, not adopt, adapt. Okay, what else do we have here? What is your opinion, if any, about identity and access management systems like Keycloak? Are they useful in Kubernetes or are they better alternatives? I mean, yeah, Keycloak is useful in Kubernetes, and it's more or less, it's the one I see all over, right? Outside of my vendor gives me and tells me what I use. Keycloak is a thing, yeah. We're currently running Azure Monitoring. In your opinion, what would be the benefits switching to Grafana Labs tool stack? I don't use Azure Monitoring much, hardly at all, so I cannot compare those. Sorry, I have no idea. Which tools are important to master for DevOps engineer? All. The DevOps today, how many people define, especially when people say DevOps engineer, so that you need to, it's important to master operating systems, Linux, pick one, cloud, pick one, and then go to others, Kubernetes, Kubernetes ecosystem, building stuff, testing stuff, writing code, of course, there is dev in all that. It's everything. It's I think that the term DevOps engineer is unsustainable because it's everything. Pros, cons, Splunk versus Grafana Lab. Oh man, sorry, Michael, I'm going to give you a similar answer as before. I use Splunk heavily, but years ago, right? I do not know in depth where is Splunk today to compare it. What I can say, sorry, about the previous one is that if you're using Kubernetes, you might not be, but if you're using Kubernetes, Prometheus is unavoidable. You can avoid anything else. You can say, hey, I'm not going to use Loki for logging. I'm going to use something else. Fair enough. I'm going to use traces through Jaeger instead of Tempo. Fair enough. Prometheus is unavoidable. Simply because significant number of projects in CNCF that depend on metrics one way or another, and there are a lot of them, assume Prometheus by default, first option. Everything else comes later. That will change with the open telemetry, probably, but right now you cannot avoid Prometheus simply because a lot of other components you will be using in your Kubernetes cluster assume that there is Prometheus. Now, whether you want to use Prometheus, and I'm using it as Grafana Labs, even though it's not really Grafana, but they adopted it. If you have to use Prometheus, then it's a question whether for traditional monitoring, not kind of tool integration, you want to add something else or just stick with it, right? What's the advantage of using Crossplane for infrastructure as code versus using Terraform? I believe Crossplane stores infrastructure to Kubernetes cluster. How does it help? How can I answer it? I have a couple of ways I can attack this question. One way to look at it, I could answer, one way I can answer that is answering with a question, right? What are the reasons that somebody is using Kubernetes for running their applications there, right? And now, when I ask that question, why are you using Kubernetes? Nothing to do with Crossplane. Some people will say, hey, because of the scheduling capabilities. As somebody else would say, hey, because of the of continuous drift detection, reconciliation. Somebody else would say, hey, because almost all the innovation is happening in Kubernetes, so if we want to benefit that better if our applications are running in Kubernetes, then way we can adopt service meshes or logging or this or that, right? And so on and so forth. So depending on whom I ask, people give me different answers why they use Kubernetes. Again, so far nothing to do with Crossplane. Now, assuming that those questions are asked, and I'm imagining now that you're answering to yourself, why do you use Kubernetes if you're using it, right, for your applications? Now, my answer to that would be, to your question would be, well, the reasons are the same for Crossplane, right? Whatever are the reasons why we like Kubernetes to manage resources that happen to be, for majority of people initially, containers, one way or another, those same reasons apply through Crossplane to manage everything else, right? Hey, you need to manage EC2 instances. You need to manage load balancers. You need to manage databases, maybe other Kubernetes clusters, and so on and so forth. You want to benefit from drift detection, reconciliation, from having an API. Hey, other tools like Terraform do not even have an API. You cannot query things. You cannot see the status of individual resources. There are many things that you cannot do without Kubernetes, independently of whether you use Crossplane or not. And once you realize all those things, or not that you cannot do, that you cannot do easily, once you realize all those benefits of using Kubernetes, again, for containers, then my answer becomes, that's why Crossplane is awesome, because it gives you those same capabilities extended beyond containers for whichever resources you might want to manage. Michael, Azure has limitations on build agents. How could we best possible create a Kubernetes native alternative? I'm assuming that, Michael, you're referring to Azure DevOps, I'm guessing, when you say agents. If you're referring to Azure DevOps, again, I'm not that familiar with Azure DevOps. Today is an embarrassing day. But Kubernetes Alternatives, you have as many alternatives in Kubernetes as you want. The question is really whether you want to self-manage something or no. If you prefer to self-manage, then alternatives are many, right? You can run anything from Jenkins. Doesn't matter whether Jenkins itself is running in Kubernetes or no, but it can run build agents in Kubernetes. That's kind of like, that's an option. You have Tecton, you have Argo workflows, many other CI solutions that were not built for Kubernetes run these days in Kubernetes, either directly or run agents in Kubernetes. So options are almost any tool that is self-managed can run in Kubernetes. Now, if you don't want self-managed, if you want a SaaS solution, then most of the tools today have a SaaS solution. But when it's SaaS, you don't care that much anymore whether it's Kubernetes or not, because why do I care? If you're giving me software as a service, like, why do I care whether it's Kubernetes or not, right? But I'm assuming that your question goes for self-managed. So Jenkins, Tecton, Argo workflows, or anything else. How to start a video channel about DevOps? Just create a new channel and start. Right? One lesson I learned is that the worst thing you can do is postpone anything, including YouTube channel, because you don't have a great microphone, you don't have a great camera, your room is not sound isolated. Just do it. Kind of take your phone, record yourself, because you know what? A year later, you're going to be embarrassed with what you did. And then the year after that, you're going to be embarrassed with the previous year, and kind of we improve over time. Just do it, right? One important thing for me, at least, don't try to overthink it, just do it. Second, focus on what you're passionate about and what you know, right? Do not try to start a channel about things that are not in your domain. Whatever you are passionate about, just express it on a camera or phone. That's it. How would you create one DevOps platform for both a parent and subsidiary company, which essentially have more or less the same needs regarding the platform? I mean, that's internal developer platform. Maybe it wouldn't be called internal developer platform, right? But you create services that others can consume. It's always this. Today, that's the model, right? AWS gives you services, you consume those services through its API. So the essential is that you need to provide to parent or subsidiary company or whatever an API that they can use to interact with your control plane. You need to have a control plane. You need to have a mechanism that will figure out when the request comes what to do with it. Whether that means creating this something, whether it should be here or there, whether it should be updated or deleted, and so on and so forth. So control plane and services running that control plane exposed through an API. Later on, you might go and create some clients for that API, like CLIs or Web UI, what's or not. But API is the first step always. Now, if you're listening to me from before, you know that I like Kubernetes. If I would start building something today, it would definitely be on Kubernetes because it would save me a lot of time. I have extensible API, just what I need. I can run over there whatever I want. It will provide services to my customers, again, through that API, to be more precise, through custom resource definitions and controllers. So if there is one thing I would say, hey, first step, Kubernetes. Second step, learn about CRDs and controllers. Once you do, your controllers will be doing the work either directly or indirectly by invoking other applications.
I want to add in something here. Maybe shift your mental thinking. Don't think parent and child. come at it from the outside world and just think of it as two separate entities that you're servicing the same, because then you're just a multi-tenant scenario at that point.
Yeah, you're having customers, you're having users. I honestly do not see a significant difference between user being a guy that sits on the other side of my desk, in the other office, in the other building, in the other country. You have your users, right? You serve your customers by giving them services that they can consume, right? Whether it's parent company, subsidiary company, that's irrelevant, right? They might have different needs, just like any business has users with different needs. You figure out whom you can serve and what those needs are, and that's it, right? Gaurav, what exactly we can achieve with Argo rollouts, or how can we integrate Argo rollouts with Argo CD? We use Argo CD for CD with Helm charts stored in Git repo. So, Argo CD job is very simple, at least to explain, right? You have Kubernetes manifests in one form or another. Doesn't matter whether it's a Helm chart or it's pure Kubernetes or customized or something else. You have Kubernetes manifests stored in Git, and Argo CD or Flux job is to make sure that whatever is there in Git, whichever manifests are there in whichever format, are actually the same as those as the resources being applied to your Kubernetes cluster. That's what it does, right? Now, Argo rollouts, I'm going to ignore now CD for a second. Argo rollouts is all about defining the conditions that should be met to progress with the deployment or with the rollout of your application, right? That means I have an old release, I have a new release, send percentage of the traffic to the new release, everything else goes to the old release. Check whether certain conditions are met, and if they are met, increase the percentage of the traffic going to the new release, decrease equally the percentage of traffic going to the old release. Repeat. If conditions are not met over a certain period of time, roll back, right? So we gradually increase the reach of our new release, and that way we are lowering the blast radius if something goes wrong, right? If something might go wrong, I don't want 100% of my users to experience it. I want 10%. And then if they're happy, I continue. If they're not happy, something's wrong. I did not affect everybody, right? Now, Argo rollouts or Flagger or any similar tool, they're just Kubernetes resources, right? You need to apply them to the cluster somehow, and then Kubernetes and controllers in Kubernetes will do that heavy work for you, right? Now, how do we apply those resources? How we make sure that Kubernetes resources are exactly what we want in Kubernetes? That's Argo CD, right? So Argo CD does synchronization. Argo rollouts does evaluation of certain metrics, let's say Prometheus, and making sure the traffic is forwarded based on certain criteria to one pod or another, old or a new release. So, in other words, how to integrate those two? Well, you define Argo rollouts manifest and push it to Git. Argo CD will make sure that that manifest is applied to the cluster, and rollouts will do progressive upgrade or update. How should the Helm chart be tested? What would you recommend? Well, test it with Helm template command. If the output is what you need, what you expect it to be, that's it, right? It's working. Now, assuming that when I say test Helm chart, I'm assuming that you don't mean test whether my application is running successfully in production, right? That's unrelated with whether it's Helm or something else. But if you're talking about testing Helm templating, and Helm templating, all it does is convert curly braces into some values, then that's what you test. You test whether the output of Helm template, Helm template command is what you expect it to be. From Johnny, regarding AI and future, do you think will it reduce jobs and demand in IT, or will it transform job positions? It will do both. So I do not think that it will reduce jobs, because we had those conversations from the dawn of time, right? When industrial revolution started, people were asking, hey, you have those factories that do some of the things that we were doing before manually. That means that I'm out of job, maybe for a short period of time, but overall, we are not more unemployed now than before industrial revolution, right? And since then, we had quite a few smaller revolutions, right? Or bigger ones. And always, historically, in the past, that means not less people being needed, but people doing more, right? The same amount of since Henry Ford started revolutionizing car industry, right? It's not that less people started working for him. Quite the opposite. More people. It's just that more cars were produced per person, right? So I think that we will be doing more. And the scale of what we do is increasing, so we definitely, I don't think that it will reduce number of jobs. Some people will lose jobs, that yes, but the number of people will not reduce. And people who will lose jobs are always the same type of people, and that's people who do not adapt to the changes. So you need to adapt.
Terraform and Ansible remove jobs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, precisely that kind of. Yeah. That's a great example. Terraform. Hey, compare Terraform to what we were doing before Terraform, Ansible, CF Engine, and all those tools. You need less people to manage the same amount of infrastructure. Yeah. Do we have less people working on those problems? No. We just manage more. Recently, a client asked to my team for a way to alert before their pods explode. Okay, to prevent it, maybe AI could help with this case, fixing information and trying to predict the behavior. Maybe it can. But I think that AI in the current, it's very early stage. I don't think that now you can go and Google AI, help me prevent my problems, and we don't have that. That's coming, right? What you can do now, you can do a lot without AI, which doesn't exist in the form it should exist anyway. You said, a way to alert before their pods explode, right? Now, think of it this way. What are the reasons their pods explode, right? Now, one can say that's random. It can be anything. And it's true. It can be anything. But in practice, there are certain patterns that might be the same or different than patterns that others establish, right? So what I would suggest is when a pod does explode, find out why it exploded. And once you find out why it exploded, then you instruct your system to do the same, perform same type of actions as what you did, right? So let me give you an example, silly example. My pod reaches, process my pod has memory leaks. It reaches the limit that is assigned to the pod, and then it explodes because the process over there cannot just getting more and more memory. And it explodes, it restarts, a new one starts, right? Now, if that's the cause, and I'm just using random example, right? Can you observe in your metrics memory consumptions? Yes, you can, right? Once you do that, can you create alert that will notify you when that happens before it happens, like it reached 80% or whatever the number is? Yes, it can, right? The first case, Prometheus, I'm just random example. Second, alert manager, I think, whatever is the alerting in Prometheus, yes, notify you, excellent. Now, after that, what you do is, hey, now can I have, and let's say that the solution was to actually scale up, increase the number of pods. Let's say that was the solution. Excellent. Can I find a tool that will scale automatically based on metrics, the same metrics that I found out in Prometheus? Yes, you can. Horizontal pod autoscaler alone can do that. CADA, if you want something fancier, right? So try to operationalize or automate the observations you have and the actions you perform. That's how you get the winning combination, right? Before AI, let's not go crazy. You don't need the AI for that, unless you're Google, right? AWS SAM versus serverless framework. Which one do you think is better for Lambda development or AWS? What is SAM? Heck, my brain stopped now. Can you tell me what is SAM? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, it's the serverless application something.
Okay,
it's
okay,
the AWS
okay.
framework versus the
Okay.
serverless, branded framework.
Okay, yeah. Okay, serverless. You mean independent of AWS, that framework we had for a while now. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas serverless.com is the serverless side.
Yeah. I haven't used serverless.com for a while now, so I cannot really say. But Lambda development on AWS, the problem I have with Lambda, and that I'm not using it that heavily for reasons that I can go into later if you ask me. But my problem with Lambda is that you cannot really run it locally. That's my issue. But once you get to the AWS, then use whichever tool you normally use to manage AWS resources, right? Because Lambda at the end of the day is an AWS resource, just as EKSs or load balancer or EC2 or subnets. So whichever tool, if you're using Terraform, use Terraform for that as well. If you like Crossplane, use Crossplane for that, and so on and so forth, right?
I think the answer is, if there's any chance that you would ever go, the phrase I'm seeing a lot now is super cloud, meaning it's multi-cloud, then I would not use SAM. I would use serverless. Because if I have to have something running in multiple places, but then I'm probably not going to be using the Lambda-like things or functions or whatever you want to call it. I'm probably going to be creating triggerable processes within something, whatever that is.
That's my problem with Lambda, right? Your code needs to be done in a certain way. And if you run Lambdas as containers, which you can, containers needs to be based on specific images. And both of those means that that can run only as Lambda. There is. I mean, maybe some other provider will say, "Hey, I can run Lambda in the same way," but that's why And if you watch this channel, you heard me and probably Darren quite a few times saying, "Hey, I'm a fan of Google Cloud Run," not because I'm Google fanboy, but because or Azure Container Apps, just so that nobody says I'm insisting on Google. Azure Container Apps. Which are also serverless frameworks, not necessarily functions as a service, but serverless definitely. And all they require me is to say, here's a container image. I don't care what's in it. I run your containers as serverless applications, right? And when you do that, which I don't think Lambda can do, then, what is better? Anything works there, right? Then you can move anywhere you want. What do you think about CKA, CKAD kind of certificates? Is it important to get a certificate? I think for me, it was very important early on in my careers, because when I did not have experience, certificates were a way for me to. So there are two parts of it, actually. Certificate as a paper was a way for me to demonstrate that I know something that I cannot back with real world experience, right? I could say, hey, here it says that I know this, because I couldn't say, yeah, I've been working on this for 10 years, right? I couldn't say that early on. So from that perspective, I think that certificate as a paper is good for people with fewer years of real-world experience, right? A second advantage is that for some people, it's a very, very good and structured way to learn, right? So you could be having many experience in this industry, but then you want to tackle something new, and certification could be a good way for you to learn, because hey, you're not going to learn much from this channel because I'm anything but structured. I'm completely unstructured, right? Kind of random things come along. If you want a structured way to learn, then certification program might be good, right? So, and then whether you use that paper or no, it's up to you. How to become a Docker champion like you? First of all, I'm not a Docker champion anymore. I stopped being a Docker captain a few months ago. So I'm not a Docker champion. Now, how to become, I do not know what is the process right now. When I became, I was invited directly by Docker. I think that right now, at least last I know, when I was in the program and active, somebody would need to nominate you as a champion, and then somebody would say yeah or no. Thoughts on Elastic Elk? Depends on whether we are talking about Elastic as a service or Elastic self-managed, like you're running it. If it's service, separate story, but if it's self-managed, you run it. I don't like it, and the reason is relatively simple. Quite the opposite of what many people... Many people like Elastic because there is one thing to run, and that thing can store logs, can store metrics, can store traces, and can store anything else, right? One thing, which is advantage. Now, my logic goes differently. I don't like it because its ability to store and do anything means that it's not necessarily good at anything, right? I do not, if I look only logs in isolation, there are many better ways to store logs and query logs than Elastic, like Loki, for example. If you look only metrics in isolation, again, many, many better solutions. If you look at traces in isolation, many better solution, right? So it's not better than alternatives for any specific type of data. And I personally, I would run like Loki, Prometheus, Jaeger, or Tempo than Elastic Elk. And apart from not being good, it's very, very, and this is again the reason, because, hey, apart from being old, it needs to be able to do everything, and then the resource consumption goes through the roof. You will need to feed it all the time, kind of like, oh, you come to the office in the morning and say, oh, what do I need to do? First thing I need to do is give more memory to Elastic. And then next week again, oh, what's the first thing on my agenda? More memory, because whatever it needed last week, now it needs more, right? So it's always resource hungry and demanding, more than other tools. I mean, all those tools require resources. So I'm not extremely fond of Elastic. Now, if you use a service, I'm guessing that there is Elastic Cloud or something, then you don't care about those things. It's their problem, not yours. Hi, should I use Helm or customize to template my application manifest when using Argo CD? When I can choose for my applications, and I repeat, my applications, not third-party applications. For my applications, I choose customize over Helm any time of the day. So what's that? Dustin, if I can automate DB and API development in interconnect nodes, have Python object and its functions as shareable open source no code, what features do you think would be useful for that new platform? I do not know what the platform is. What's the focus of the platform? So if I can, you can ping me later. You need to tell me a bit more about the project before I tell you what I think would be useful. Sorry for that. John, please share some tips or tricks for engineers to preserve mental, physical health. Do you have your daily exercise? I'm the last person to ask that, and I think that Darin will confirm that's I'm not the good one.
So what I do is, so Victor and I live 6 hours apart. By time zone, not driving time, 6 time zones apart. We sleep probably about the same amount. He's going to bed when I'm going to bed, and I'm getting up when he's getting up. It's just 6 time zones apart. So number one, Victor does it wrong, but to an extent, I do it weird because I get up about 4 a.m. and I go to bed about 8. Most people won't do that, whereas Victor's different. Now, exercise. I used to go to the gym pre-COVID, and I've just never renewed my membership. That's the word I'm looking for, membership. I go for roughly an hour and 40-minute walk because that's what it takes to get around my neighborhood. Every day. Pretty much without fail. I don't run. I'm not lifting weights I should. But just getting out and walking. Now, I live out in the, not super country, but out. So not a lot of traffic. So I feel safe getting out. But I do that at 4:30 in the morning. A lot of people, they wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, I did start doing something healthy for a change.
Okay.
Recently. Yeah, I started bicycling over weekends, like for 4 or 5 hours, like 50 kilometers, something like that.
Right.
So,
moving.
But still, unhealthy life.
Is moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, so moving. I think if you can move every day for 30 minutes or some magic number, you pick to where you feel. Because when I first start my walk in the mornings, number one, it's still really dark. But when I first start, I'm not feeling so great. But about an hour in, it's like, oh, I feel good. And then the last 40 just goes by. Anytime I walk for less than an hour 40, it feels weird. So that's me.
And regarding go ahead.
No, I just think moving every day is the key part. Outside, not inside. Okay.
And regarding mental health, I know that there were a couple of cases in the past where actually people cited me as the reason for the deterioration of their mental health. So, not a good example for that either. Please, what Git branching strategy would you recommend, or do you use Terraform? I don't think that there is any relation between those two.
No, I think let me jump in. I think what it means is some people, because I've done this, is I would have a branch for every environment for Terraform. And I'm never really, because I'm not going to do pull requests across those branches. But there's other people that want to live everything on a single branch and they do pull requests in. And I don't know how Crossplane deals with environmentals like that. Because the Pulumi service did, I'm not going to say it does now, but Pulumi did, based on the branch is how the environment is managed.
Okay.
That's the way I read this. Right.
There
so
might be
I would have a dev stage
right?
in main. Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and I'm going to ignore now that some tool might prefer a certain pattern, right? When that tool prefers a certain pattern, then use the pattern of the tool you chose, period, right? Now, ignoring those forced patterns, my logic is very simple. Everything is temporary except the main line, right? And every branch should be mergeable to the main line. I really don't like the idea of having permanent branch, right? That is never merged to the main line. Like, to me, saying this environment, I don't care whether it's production or development or staging or what, kind of lives in this branch that has completely separate life from the main line of that repo. To me, that feels wrong. If it's not merged into the main line, then it shouldn't be a branch. It should be a separate repo or a directory in the same repo. That's how I see it.
If you use the tool, like since you said Terraform, there is an open source project, if you've not heard about it, called Atlantis that allows you to manage all that for you. And it is a per repo. So environment is a repository. So you can set up pull requests, it'll verify everything for you and it'll merge it for you automatically. But that means that it has to be a repository per environment. So
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I haven't used Atlantis, but to me that makes a lot of sense. If you do use pull requests, I honestly don't understand how that would work with permanent branches, right? I mean, I know that you can make a pull request to any branch, but no.
we've got about 5 minutes left. So
Okay.
do you want to? We'll go through these fast. Here we go.
How to apply for a DevOps engineer job with no prior experience? I don't think that people should be DevOps engineers with no prior experience. Sorry for that. I think people should go towards ops or dev first. It's just overwhelming to start with both. And then later on say, oh, I'm interested. I'm now doing development. I'm interested in ops. Let me figure out ops, how it works, and then combine it and call myself DevOps something. How do I become more skillful to get an interview experience? Yeah, okay. What I said is silly because if you're looking for the first interview, then you cannot have experience without working somewhere, right? Open source, right? Contribute to open source. I'm now doing quick ones. Is it the best practice to give resource limitations to pods in Kubernetes? Yes. How should we provide the right resource limitations for them? For memory, definitely do resource limitations. For logs, for CPU, maybe just put resource requests and limitation to the same number. There is a big discussion about that. You will Google it. And how should we provide the right resource limitations to them? By observing the behavior of your pods, right? You cannot get it right. But I assume that in this case, when you say limitations, you mean requests and limitations. How much I expect this to work, and what is the maximum limit of that something. You need to observe the behavior, right? You cannot know in advance how much some process needs in a real life situation in production without just running it in production and then observing how much it uses of something and then adjusting. How do you manage your infrastructure? Terraform repo? Do you use multi-repo approach or single repo having separate environment directory? I think we answered that. I personally, each environment is either a different repository or is a different directory in the same repository. Everything mainline becomes something, everything else is temporary. Hi Vic, have a question. Do you have some good tool for event export from Kubernetes to external chat or something? Currently using Kube event exporter, but it's a little bit unfriendly. Try Robusta. I will find a video as well in my channel. If you use response time based HPA, KEDA, where is the best way to get response time metrics, service mesh data in Prometheus, APM data, any other idea? Yeah, if you use service mesh, then service mesh is the best source for that. I mean, the best source is actually tracing, right? Depends how fine-tuned you need something to be. If it's on a level of request, how much does it take for request entering the cluster until it exits, right? No matter through how many applications it goes through, you can get it from ingress. If you need for each service, but service as a whole, service mesh is great. If you need something more fine-tuned, how much does it take within an application? Then traces would be a good way to do it. How to copy file and run command on remote server in Python Pulumi? I don't use Python for a while now. I don't know. Do you think you can achieve to have a platform similar to Datadog but with open source technologies? Yeah, that's Grafana. Which tools would be essential for achieving this? Grafana. There are startups popping up who build paid platforms on top of Backstage. Do you think there is a market for that? Or Backstage is enough in itself and you just need to use it? I mean, there is always a market for something as a service. There are always people, me including, that, hey, if you tell me that I don't need to manage this myself, or at least not fully, somebody else will do it for me, I'm in for it, right? The same answer is kind of, is there a market for somebody else managing my virtual machines? Well, if you asked me that 20 years ago, I might have said no, but today it's obviously the answer is yes. So there is a market for something as a service, professionals dedicated to that, managing it for me. So yes.
And that's it. So you want to go ahead and wrap up?
Okay. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Darin, for showing your face. That doesn't happen often in this
It doesn't
stream.
happen. So also, just for next week, there is no AMA next week because you're gone.
I'm gone.
You're gone. And there's also, for DevOps Paradox, people that show up on Fridays, there's no show tomorrow. So just watch on the Twitters and the Slack workspace would be the best place to see everything. In fact, that reminds me I need to go post about that. So, all right. Once you do your ad thing at the end, since we're
subscribe, like, join if you can afford it. It's cheap. It helps a lot. Convince your boss to sponsor the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Do the things you normally do.